In the aftermath of U.S. and British airstrikes in Iraq, the long-term achievements of the mission remain uncertain. The UN Security Council is divided on how to forge ahead with its Iraqi policy. 3 of the 5 permanent members, Russia, China, and France, have called for the lifting of sanctions as well as the removal of UNSCOM Executive Chairman Richard Butler. Joining me now, Columbia University's Edward Said. He is a well-known cultural historian, an expert on Middle East issues, and an author of a number of books. And I'm pleased to have him here. Later, we will have the perspective of 2 journalists who write about the Middle East, Rahida Durham and Hisham Melhem. They will be here following my conversation with Edward Said. I am pleased to have him on this broadcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Good to be here.
You are troubled by American policy to the Middle East in general.
Right.
And specifically, you find fault with the Iraqi policy on what grounds?
Well, I think it's sort of inconsistent. I think it's cruel. I think it's short-sighted, and I think it's, in the end, ineffective. I mean, it's not clear what, in the end, is intended. I mean, they want to get rid of Saddam Hussein, but obviously they haven't, and you can't do it this way. They want to contain him. There's not much to contain. I mean, he's not a threat to anyone. The repetition of, you know, the threat that he poses to his neighbors and the others, I think, is kind of hollow. And in the end, I think he's a convenient devil. You know, he's a kind of figure out there to be knocked every so often. He serves that purpose. But beyond that, I don't see what the policy is all about.
Let me come back and talk about the future of the Middle East and maybe American foreign policy in general. But let me stay with Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
Should we try to remove him?
No, of course not. I mean, we can't be in the business of removing people that we don't like. I mean, I would put, if that was the case, there are a lot of candidates for that position. I mean, for example, I would think that one would want to get rid of a lot of figures in the Middle East who are sort of troublesome and dictatorial and simply going no place. I mean, but that can't be the criterion.
Are you comfortable if he has nuclear weapons, biological weapons, and chemical weapons, and has the means and the will to use them?
Yeah, he has neither one nor the other.
Okay, but suppose he does. Does that bother you?
Yeah, of course it bothers me, but there are a lot of nuclear powers who have, like Israel, who have all of those weapons, like the United States, who have used their weapons, have no visible constraints.
Well, and so, you know, you and I are friends, and we were having a debate here. I don't want people to get the wrong idea.
No.
But the United States, to its remarkable admiration since World War II, first as the only nuclear power, and then later with the Soviet Union being an opposing superpower, never, ever used its nuclear weapons after the war. Didn't use them.
But it did use them against
Japan. The war. It did.
But, I mean,
and it brought a conclusion to that war.
But I disagree
and saved
with you.
American lives.
Well, I disagree with you on all these matters. In other words, I don't think American foreign policy is admirable. I think the United States is an imperial power, the last imperial power. It behaves like all other imperial powers behave. No, I mean, I think it does. I mean, look what the United States has done in Central America. Look what the United States has done in Indonesia. Look what it did in Cambodia. Look what it did in Vietnam.
In Indonesia, it supported the Suharto regime, which was a corrupt regime.
And it supported the invasion of East Timor in 1976. I mean, there's a long record. And the United States, to come to the part of the world that I know best, the United States has for years supported corrupt, dictatorial, in every sense of the word, unprogressive regimes. For the United States supported Saddam Hussein, for one.
Okay, fine.
I mean, they supported Saddam Hussein.
That was a strategic move at the time.
I mean, there's always a reason.
Because Iran were holding American hostages for a while, and secondly, it declared America the great state.
The support for Saddam began in the 70s. They supported him for other reasons. He was, for one thing that hasn't been made clear, I think, in general discussions about Iraq. Iraq, I think, is, of all the Middle Eastern countries, the Arab countries, is the one with the greatest potential, technologically, agriculturally, in point of view of natural resources, and its human resources.
Do you want to tell the people of Kuwait that when Saddam Hussein invaded that country and the kind of atrocities that were committed in the name of Iraq and that invasion, you know, that he's no threat to his neighbors?
No, of course he was a threat to his neighbors. There's no question about it. The irony is that Kuwait supported him in the war with Iran. They gave him $15 billion. And when I was there...
But that has nothing to do with it,
No, I agree with you. No, but I mean, here's something to remember, that they thought that he was the champion of the Arabs against the Persians. I mean, this is a fact. Why did they support him? I, for example, have never had anything to do with the Iraqi regime in any shape or form. I never saw him as a champion of the Arabs. I understood that Iraq is an important, powerful, rich, impressive Arab country, but that it had one of the most horrible regimes in the world. What I'm saying is that there's a series of inconsistencies based on realpolitik and changing interests that have to be recognized. It's not a matter of good and evil. The good, if you want to consider the Kuwaitis good, supported him. And then he swallowed them.
Okay. My point, again, was that he has shown that he is prepared to act when he has the will and the means to act and invade a neighbor.
Yes,
and I don't have any doubt that he would have gone into Saudi Arabia.
Right,
Do you?
Right. I don't know. But there's no doubt
another
that
regime
other
I suspect you don't like.
Well, no, of course not. I mean, do you like them? I mean, what is there to like? I mean, the point is that the Middle East is full of regimes invading other countries. I mean, Israel has invaded 4 Arab countries, is still in occupation of South Lebanon, still in occupation of most.
Wait.
No, but I mean,
Israel has invaded. I mean, Israel has not
invaded,
attacked.
Yes,
wait, which war did they start?
1978, they invaded Lebanon.
Okay, but I mean, go back to the Six-Day War.
They invaded in 1982.
Who started the Six-Day War?
Well,
Who started
the Six-Day War?
Where we are? Who started the Yom Kippur War? Who started the Yom Kippur War?
The Yom Kippur
Who started the Six-Day
War? On the occupation. They invaded Sinai, the Egyptians. They invaded their own territory held by the Israelis. They crossed the Suez Canal, which is Egyptian territory.
After they had been attacked.
Who was attacked?
And after who'd been attacked?
No, I mean, what part
Israel.
We're talking about 73, isn't that right?
Well, I don't know. We've been all over the place.
The 67. Begin in 1982 said that the 67 war was not a necessary war. They knew perfectly well that they would win the war. And Nasser got himself in this ridiculous position, threatening Israel and being simply physically unready. But be that as it may, every UN resolution since that time, including the ones passed against Iraq, have said that no occupied territory, according to the Geneva Conventions, the international law, and UN resolutions, can be held indefinitely. So it's not Iraq alone that's doing it. It's a common practice. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but I mean, you believe in the peace...
I'm against them all.
Are you against the peace process?
No, I'm against...
Are you against the peace process?
Now, which peace process?
Oslo peace process.
I was critical of it from the beginning. I'm, of course, for peace,
yes,
but I think it can't be just any kind of peace.
So that process supported by Arafat, and who I realize you have huge differences with, and you quit the Palestinian Authority because you had those differences.
The Palestinian Council.
I'm sorry. Right.
But look where it went to. I was right. I predicted that this would happen.
Well, it's not over yet.
I think it's pretty much
over.
I
don't know. It is. I mean, we've got you got a call for a unity government in Israel. It may very well get back on track with a unity government. So maybe
the problem with the peace process, as it now stands, is that there are there's too much of a disparity between the sides. The Israelis control too much territory, Palestinian territory, and Palestinians cannot look forward, cannot look ahead to self-determination, which is what I think is needed. I think to have peace...
So do I.
Yeah, I think what you need to have peace is you have to have reconciliation. Right. The Palestinians are the victims of a historical injustice. Many Israelis will agree with this.
And so do I.
Yeah, of course. So that injustice has to be rectified in some way. I think, first of all, it has to be acknowledged. The peace process says nothing about that. Second, Palestinians have to be assured that at the end of the process there will be self-determination.
Hold the Palestinians for a second.
Sure.
We'll come back
to Iraq.
All right, let's get to Iraq.
Right.
I just want to understand where you are. You're basically saying he's no threat, he's ineffective, we don't need to attack him.
Now he's no threat. Now he's no threat.
Okay, now he's no threat. He's no threat because...
He's a threat to his people.
Why is he no threat?
Now, I'll tell you.
Why is he no longer a threat?
A threat to his neighbors is what we were talking about.
Why?
All the indications are that he doesn't have the military or technological means.
Why did that come to bear? That he does not have the military or technological means?
Yes, as a result
because
of the
he launched an attack and got his...
Yeah, exactly. But I'm talking about what happened afterwards. What happened afterwards is you've had this regime of sanctions for 7 or 8 years.
Right.
Charlie, 6,000 children are dying every month.
I understand that.
Yes, but that has to be taken into consideration.
And it should. But why don't you get Saddam Hussein to take it into consideration, is the argument made by the Secretary of State.
I have no brief for Saddam Hussein. I'm simply saying Iraq is more than Saddam Hussein.
Okay, but sanctions. You didn't oppose. I mean, you could argue.
Yes.
You can argue that people got hurt because of sanctions imposed against any government, including South Africa.
Right. Yes, of course.
Now, and it forced those, in some cases, governments to change.
Yes, but there was a process of change.
And the government then changed, and things got better for their people. Now, you and I might agree on the fact that generally when you have a despot, he's unlikely to change because of sanctions because it doesn't hurt him.
Right, exactly.
It hurts the people.
Exactly. The question is this the top foreign policy threat to the United States. I think it isn't.
Right.
In other words, I think that it brought into perspective. Iraq is potentially a very powerful country. As I say, it was, of all the Arab countries, it was the most interesting and potentially powerful of the lot. It's now been bombed back to, let's say, 200 years. It's become, if it will not recover in the near future anything like its technological and social services. So it is now, in my opinion, no longer a threat. I agree that Saddam Hussein obviously is the worst thing that can happen to this country. But I think one has to look beyond that, to look to the society, to look to the region, and to try to figure out some policy that is consistent and not, you know, when you feel like it. And the cynicism of this last strike is quite obvious. So,
the reason you're here is to express your feelings. I mean, that's why I wanted to hear from you, because you're ideas better, you know, because you are eloquent in terms of both analysis as well as your expression of that analysis. Yeah. What should we do? Just leave him alone?
I think so. Yes, I do think so. In other words, I think that in this case, benign neglect and allowing the natural...
To steal a line from Moynihan.
You know, exactly. I mean, I don't think that there's anything that the United States can rationally or positively do. It can feel good by bombing. You know, it's a good testing ground for high-tech weapons. But beyond that, look at the day after. What are the accomplishments of this? Very, very few.
Well, you know, that's an interesting question to investigate, and I don't know the answer yet, and I'm not sure anyone knows the answer yet. They believe, they being the administration, or at least they say, they accomplished the mission, which was to degrade his capacity to wage either biological, chemical, or nuclear warfare. Mm-hmm. I talked last week with an Iraqi scientist who defected in 1994. Mm-hmm. He said Saddam will, unless he is removed, get and have the ability to deploy nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. And he's within a year of being able to do that.
Mm. I'm not sure about that. You know, I mean, many of the UNSCOM reports, the reports from the United Nations, indicate that it's a much more complex picture than that, than anything simple like in a few months he will have a nuclear capacity. I mean, that's kind of nonsense.
Why is it nonsense?
Well, because, I mean, everything that we know suggests that it's a country in dire straits, that the possibility of reconstructing a massive arms industry of the sort that existed before the Gulf War are very, very small.
Why do you think
that there, excuse me, let me just finish this point, that there are other more important things than the constant beating up on Saddam Hussein and Iraq. I mean, I think Saddam Hussein is a calamity. I'm not trying to minimize that out. But I think what's more important is the preservation and development of Iraqi society, so that there will develop an alternative to Saddam Hussein within the society. That's the only hope. It can't be done by these 60, 70, 80 opposition groups that the CIA is giving money to. They're not doing anything. They're squabbling among themselves. They have no standing. They have no constituency, visible constituency, inside Iraq. It's obvious that it has to come from Iraq, I think. And this is the logic that I think in the end will restore something like the semblance of a civil society to Iraq, not constant bombing and this kind of, in my opinion, dehumanized cruelty that we administer just because it's a convenient thing to do. He's defenseless. As you know, there wasn't a single American casualty. I mean, this man cannot respond. So I think to put him back in the bin and to concentrate on what can be done to develop within the society. I don't know how the United States can do it. Maybe there are things that are beyond the United States' power. I think that's an important thing to admit and to concede.
Edward Said, my friend, he's a professor at Columbia. He's written a number of books, as I said, many of them penetrating analysis of our culture and also of the Middle East. I thank you. I make note of a program note that you're coming back for a long conversation that has to do with not only your work but also your life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much.
Edward Said. Back in a moment, two new perspectives on the war against Iraq from two journalists. Stay with us.